among the many subject matters that we deal with, we have to deal with the national side of the movement because, as our grantee was breaking down, there's an imbalance. So oftentimes when you go into a Moorish Science of America, you get a lot of the divine information, but pertaining to the national side, that information isn't always present. So that's a fixation and a focus for us. In particular, is the national side of the movement, because if you look at the movement as a body, you have the divine side, which is the spirit or the soul, and the national side, which is the body, is the physical, is how we're able to navigate in the physical world as a collective.
That's right.
Islam.
So oftentimes when you study more science, you get into history from a vantage point of, the Moors prior to the European insurgents into political power. So you're going to hear about the Moorish history from the 1700s. Prior to that, you're going to hear about the Moorish history in Spain, in North Africa. But what about the Moorish history after that period? The Prophet explicitly says that there was an era of slavery from 1779 to 1865. So the Moors focus on the 1779 side. George Washington, and you had Chief Ben Bey, Sheikh Ben Bey, you want all of this history about the Moors, but there was an era of slavery, our nationality was taken away. What happened? So that's what we're gonna that's what we were touching on last week, and we're touching on, we're gonna have this particular theme, whatever. So we're dealing with the Civil War period. We're dealing with the laws that freed us. We understand it was an era of slavery. Does anybody in here dispute that our ancestors were put into slavery? Given Christian names, forced it, yeah, so I don't think anybody's here to dispute that fact. So with that in mind, the prophet said that the era of slavery ended in 1865. Well, then what law ended slavery in America? What was the legislation that was passed that completely eradicated the vestige, not the vestige of slavery, but slavery as an institution, us being forced into manual labor? These are the laws that pertain to our people, specifically. Like when you're talking about laws in American history, these are laws specifically created for us. So we know that we were free. Does anybody, want to take a stab at what law freed us? 14. Not 14. That's good. Yeah, you're in the ballpark. You're in the ballpark for sure. So there was a series of amendments that were passed. They were called the Reconstruction Amendments. So the 14th is one of them. The 13th Amendment. Well, let's start on one.
Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Definitely didn't end slavery. There was not even a United Nations in 1865 to create a Declaration of Human Rights. That was something that was added much later.
And if you get into the UN, it's not even a governmental organization.
Yes, it's an NGO. NGO stands for non-governmental organization. These are the corporations that were created by the governments of the world.
And
they all together.
It's a violation of the Constitution you can do with the United Nations.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't give foreign powers the say-so over American citizenship, because that's a form of treason.
It's law. So, but that's where the authority of the United Nations declarations come from. So this is long after. This is before the Prophet Noble Drew Ali. This is before World War I. This is before World War II. So clearly, this is before the League of Nations and before the United Nations historically. All right, but this is the period by which our ancestors were free from bondage. So I would think that's a very significant aspect of Moorish history. If us being enslaved is significant, then wouldn't us being free also be significant?
Islam.
Right. So that's what leads us into the demonstration that we're dealing with today. Oh, brother Jason, yeah, I guess you're gonna do my. If you don't mind, I guess you're gonna do my reading. Page 80. We're gonna go to page 88. So, just to give a quick recap of what happened last week, we're just talking about the conditions and the situations that led into the Civil War. What was happening? What was going on in terms of what was going on politically in America at that time, as well as what was going on in terms of the inception of the war, the conditions that created what we later know as that domestic dispute known as the Civil War. It's all about No, I'm gonna have this. I'm gonna have a sheet up here. Just for the benefit of the viewers watching on YouTube or what have you, or Facebook or whatever social media medium, that this video would find its way to our people. But I guess we could start with the first complete paragraph where it says among.
All right. It's from the Resurrection book.
Oh, I'm sorry. So this book right here is called The Resurrection. I think every Moorish American should have a copy of it in their library. This book was written by the resurrected prophet, Timothy D. Goel, Grand Sheik Timothy D. Goel. He wrote this piece of literature in 1978. Very phenomenal work. Goes into both the divine and national aspects of the movement. Probably, in my opinion, the best piece of literature since the prophet of the drug in terms of the Moorish movement. I'm sorry, Mo.
Among these loyal democratic opponents of emancipation in any shape or anywhere were not wanting men, whether from loyal northern or border states, who still openly avowed that slavery was right, that rebellion to preserve its continuance was justifiable, and that there was no constitutional method of uprooting it.
All right, so very short paragraph, but let's kind of dissect that a little bit, because there's some prerequisite information that you must understand in order to understand what's being said here. So I'm going to kind of recap some of this information from last week, just for the benefit of the brothers in attendance that weren't here last week. So during the Civil War, the Emancipation Proclamation is what people perceive as the law that freed the slaves. That's why I kind of asked, because you ask so-called black people or people who they'll say the Emancipation Proclamation. But if you ask Google or Cortana or whatever, they're going to tell you the 13th Amendment. However, that's not the original 13th Amendment. We'll get to that in a second. So you had the North, which represented the Union, which represented the constitutional government of the United States of America, and you had the South, which represented the Confederacy, which represented the states who unlawfully seceded from the Union. Now, the Emancipation Proclamation, what's important to understand about that document was it only freed the slaves in territories that were in the state of rebellion against the United States of America. So there were states that lawfully, mind you, slavery was a lawful institution, not just in America, but internationally, all around the world. Even if you go back to the histories of the Moorish Empire, this was a lawful institution that Asiatics created. All right? So that's important to understand. So some states, some slaveholder states, did not rebel against the United States of America. Not every state that had slavery said, we're going to go join the Confederacy. So those states that were loyal to the Union were arguing, as he had just read, the rebellion preserved its continuance was justifiable and that there was no constitutional method of uprooting it. Meaning, there was no provisions in the Constitution that outright made slavery illegal. As a matter of fact, there were provisions that protected the institution. For example, fugitive slave clause, for example, in the Constitution, which basically described that if a slave escaped from a slave territory to a free territory, that slave still was property of the slave owner in the slave territory and supposed to be returning property, as if, like, if you found you found anything that belonged, you found my laptop, you found my car keys, you found my wallet. Legally and lawfully, you're supposed to return my possession to me. And slaves were considered property or registered in the county as your cattle, or today you might register your tractor or whatever. All right, so just kind of wanted you to understand that it wasn't no pun intended, black and white, in the sense that every slave state was with the Confederacy. Every state that had free, there were states that were loyal, or states that were bordering slave states that were loyal, but they still had slavery and wanted to keep slavery. The issue was that the slave states decided that they were just going to break off and do their own thing. But we'll get into that in a later date. Let's continue. Listen to this man's name, Salisbury. He's a very important individual in that time period.
Salisbury of Delaware was representative and spokesman of this class, and he took occasion during this very debate to defend slavery as a divine institution which had the sanction both of the Mosaic and Christian
I'm about to turn up. I'm very passionate about this subject, boys. I'm very passionate about this subject, and there's a lot of light that's revealed in this section. If you actually watched the video last week, I'm probably a little more lethargic than I am right now. Very excited to talk about this subject matter.
It's long.
So Salisbury, remember we talked about a class that was still loyal to the Union, but advocated and wanted to maintain the institution of slavery. All right? So there's a debate that's taking place in the Senate. This debate that we're about to go into is the precursor to the law that ended slavery, the law that ended the era of slavery in 1865. This debate is what manifested what is referred to as the 13th Amendment with 20 sections. If you open up your Constitution, how many sections does the 13th Amendment have?
2.
It has 2. So something I'm saying is quite controversial. Any political scholar, historian, politician, political pundit, whatever, they will all say 13th Amendment has 2 sections. 13th Amendment with 20 sections, preposterous. Now, mind you, this is the law that freed us. Anybody seen the documentary of 13? See, that documentary explains how we were re-enslaved through the 13th Amendment. With 2 sections.
That's right.
But again, obviously that's the only 13th Amendment that's in operation in terms of how they're governing right now. Can we get that old statement real quick about the 14th and 15th Amendment?
Old statement.
I gotta make sure I keep privy at the time.
You need a right here. I got you.
I'm sorry.
I got you.
It's a divine warning by the prophet to the nations.
Sheet.
He said he got it right.
No, it's not.
Moorish literature.
Here you go.
Got it right there? 14th Amendment right here.
This is the book,
Wait,
right?
before you read that. Now, we're talking about the 13th Amendment, we're talking about the 14th Amendment, we're talking about the Civil War. Did the Prophet Noble Jawali talk about this period?
It's long.
Emphatically, he did. So we're about to quote him right now. So it's not just that we in here with fezzes and we just talking about some random topic. It has nothing to do with the Moorish science, nothing to do with the Moorish science of America or the Prophet Noble Jawali. We're going to show right now that this period is something that the Prophet Noble Jawali wanted on the minds of the Moors. So the Moorish Americans should be expected to know this subject matter. It's long.
The 14th and 15th Amendments brought the North and South in union, placing the Southerners who were at that time without power.
So 14th, 15th Amendment is mentioned once.
With the constitutional body of power. And at that time, 1865, the free national...
1865 is mentioned again.
That's right.
Now, we see 1865 in Act 6. Right? And we see 1865 in the divine warning by the prophets of nations. And I'm about to give y'all a master jewel. If you can't take nothing away from this demonstration or this visit to the temple, take this away. You want to understand the national side of the Moorish movement. That is the writing that breaks down the national side from the standpoint and vantage point of the Prophet Noble Jawali. It's called a divine warning by the prophet to the nations. If you're not familiar with this morning, you don't know it front to back, you don't know the national side of the movement. I'm sorry, not to take it personal or what have you, but I'm certain you wouldn't know this. If you wouldn't know the national side of the movement if you don't understand this particular document. Continue.
The free national constitutional law that was in force since 1774 declared all men equal and free. And if all men are declared by the free national constitution to be free and equal...
It's not right. So the prophet is saying that in terms of all men being free and equal, that already exists in the Constitution. Right? So he's talking about freedom. Who is he talking about the freedom of?
Slaves.
Former slaves. Right? Well, who is he specifically talking about? Let's identify who those people are that he's talking about in terms of freedom in the Constitution. In that section right there, he's talking about us.
Islam.
He's talking about us, as most of his work is dedicated to. Islam,
Backtrack. Declared by a free national constitution to be free and equal, since that constitution has never been changed, there is no need for the application of the 14th and 15th Amendment for the salvation of our people and citizens.
So stop right there. So the Prophet Noble Ali says, one, you must take note that he mentions the 14th and 15th Amendment. So by proxy alone, that tells you that if you are Moorish American, if you wear a fez, if you follow the Prophet Noble Ali, if you adhere to the principles that he's talking about, then you should be familiar with this particular period. Right? Second, a man who advocates the Constitution, he says that we need to enforce the law in order to save the land. He advocates in the divine constitutional bylaws that Moorish Americans are supposed to obey the Constitution. That is a law for every Moorish American.
That's right.
Yet, he says the 14th and 15th Amendment are not necessary. How could you say a part of the Constitution is not necessary? Is he contradicting himself? Does he not know what he's talking about? Or is there something deeper that we need to look at? Because he didn't just expressly say it. But he said that the 14th and 15th Amendment are not necessary, and he explained why. Because there were aspects of the Constitution already that declared all men equal and free. But it's deeper knowledge pertaining to that document. Mind you, when was the first president in American history assassinated? Who was the first president? And when did he serve? The first president is Abraham Lincoln, who serves as the 16th president under the current Constitution. When did he serve? From 1861 to
1865.
1865. Who was in office when the 13th Amendment was passed? President Abraham Lincoln. So the man who passed the law that freed our people was the first president ever to be killed. And you want to talk about conspiracy theorists today? You need to put your tinfoil hat on now. Take your vest off, put your tinfoil hat on for that period. The first man to ever hold the office of the United States of America got his brains blown out. And it was all due to the laws and his activity in freeing our people. We're not trying to deify Abraham Lincoln like he's some saint. But you need to look at his actions. We need to look closer at that particular period, because that particular period is a turning point in American history. A major turning point in American history that includes us being free to congregate right now.
Islam.
The so-called blacks have the ability to congregate prior to 1865
Nope.
without a European president?
Nope.
Absolutely not. Did they have the right to call on Allah, their own God, or freedom of religion?
Nope.
Emphatically no. So by us being able to do what we're doing right now, this is before the Prophet Noble Ali. That very ability of that to take place was based on what transpired during this period. All right, Mo, you could continue with the original reading. I just wanted the Moors to make a connection between us talking about this period, talking about the 14th and 15th Amendment. Islam, Mo, navigate well. Talking about the 14th and 15th Amendment and, the Prophet Noble Ali, the Moorish Science of America, the Divine National Movement. There's a connection there in this conversation that we're having. Islam.
He also undertook to justify secession on the singular ground that we are sprung from a race of successionists, the proof of which he held to be in that fact that while the preamble to, as well as the body of, the Convention of Ratification of the Old Articles of Confederation between the states of New Hampshire, Massachusetts Bay, Rhode Island, and Providence Plantations, Connecticut, New
Skip
York.
the states. You just go ahead and read the part after the states.
Oh yeah, it's
Declared.
and declared that Confederation to be a perpetual union.
Stop right there. A perpetual union, because you have a lot of Moors, not a lot of Moors, but there's a section of Moors that say, they have this argument called sin die or sin D, where they say the United States Congress was, dissolved in 1865. They adjourned sin D, and sin D means this, and so the United States of America is no longer legitimate based on that. But we just read that under the Articles of Confederation, the Union was made perpetual. What does perpetual mean?
Forever.
It means forever. It means everlasting. Now, the Articles of Confederation are connected to the Constitution via Article 6, which states all treaties and contracts and engagements entered into before the adoption of the Constitution. So there was something pre-existing in the Constitution before the adoption of this Constitution shall be as valid. Everything I just said so far is literally verbatim. But I might be a little off on a couple words from this point on. As valid against this Constitution, as the Confederation or something like that. You want to just grab that little section real quick? Let me get that right there. I want to see it. You know what I mean? I want to make certain connections. We got time. We don't finish it this week. We'll continue. All debts, contracts, and engagements entered into before the adoption of this Constitution shall be as valid against the United States under this Constitution as under the Confederation. Almost verbatim. We do this, man. Y'all see the 101s, whatever. I don't got no paper in front of me. Like, this Moorish science, like, we Moorish 24/7, 365.
Islam.
We're very serious about this. So we can quote constitutional scriptures, biblical scriptures, almost from memory. Definitely the Prophet Noble Ali. So I just wanted to put that out there because, the perpetual union, I wanted to address that concept because that's one of the many misconceptions that we see in the Moorish movement. Islam, can you continue? Please?
Yet within 9 years thereafter, all the other states succeeded from New York, Virginia, North Carolina, and Rhode Island by ratifying the new Constitution for a more perfect union.
All right, so this is Salisbury's words. This is what Senator Salisbury's are. Let's continue. Now he's about to go into his argument on slavery and a justification for maintaining the institution of the United States of America and why the government can't do away with slavery. All right? So this is not the Confederacy. This is I believe this is in the House of Representatives. This is a congressional meeting. All right? So this conversation you can't find in the congressional record.
Islam.
It took place March 31st, 1864. But the Moors, the Moor man and the Moors that came before us, whose legacy we build upon to this very day, they did this knowledge and research without Google, without internet, what have you, and were honorable enough to publish in the book so that we could, for all time, reference this particular period that the Prophet. And again, they're building on the foundation of the Prophet Noble Ali. That's why I wanted to make the connection so that you could see. This book is not just talking about a whole bunch of random things. You start from the Prophet Noble Ali as the foundation, and then you build and start to explore and start to study other subject matters. Other religious institutions, they say, oh no, all you need is the Bible. All you need is the Quran. All you need is this book. Nah, we study all knowledge. Our tassels, they flow 360 degrees.
That's right.
We don't bind our tassels down. There's no school of learning that we will not walk through so long as it doesn't violate our covenant with the Most High.
Islam.
So yeah, I just want y'all to understand that. So this is a debate going on in Congress.
Said he, slavery had existed under some form or other from the first period of recorded history.
That's a fact. We just went through that.
It dates back even beyond the period of Abraham, the father of the faithful, in whose seed all nations of the earth were to be blessed. We find that immediately after the flood, the Almighty, for purposes inscrutable to us, condemned the whole race to servitude. Canaan, it's in Hebrew. And he said, "Cursed be Canaan, slave of slaves. He shall be to his brethren."
Canaan. Cursed be Canaan. What are we, Moors? We Moabites and Canaanites. All right? So this conversation, again, first thing they want to bring, the curse of Canaan, the so-called curse of Ham. You see? This is on the congressional record. This is an event that is recorded in the annals of history. Like the Declaration of Independence, like the Constitution itself, the original record exists, and this government preserves these records. Right? How the prophet says, according to all true and divine records, the divine records will be your scriptures, and the true records will be the records of nations.
Minutes.
Slow. Continue.
It continued among all people.
Or should I say the records of humanity? But I digress. Continue.
It continued among all people until the advent of the Christian era. It was recognized in that new dispensation, which was to supersede the old. It has a sanction of God's own apostle. For when Paul sent back Onesimus of Philemon, whom did he send? A free man? No, sir. He sent his doulos, a slave born as such. Not even his Agiopadon, who was such by captivity of war. Among all people and in all ages has this institution, if such is to be called, existed, and had the countenance of wise and good men, and even the Christian church itself until these modern times, up at least into the 19th century, it exists in this country and had existed from the beginning.
All right, so to summarize his argument, he's basically saying this. Slavery has always existed. According to our divine records, this was a permissible thing. The Most High even cursed Canaan into slavery. So we've always had slavery in existence. So it has been in existence in America since the beginning. So you can go all the way back to before the time of Abraham. You can go to the beginning of America. It's always been here. It's always been an institution. And that's the crux of his argument. Y'all both following me?
It's long.
All right, let's continue. Okay, wait. So let me introduce the negative in the argument. He's affirmative. The Salisbury is the affirmative for slavery. The negative, or the person who's his opponent in this debate is named Mr. Harlan or Senator Harlan. And I'm sorry, I said it was in the House of Representatives. This debate is taking place in the Senate. So just for you, when you look it up, if you look at the bottom of page 88 in the Resurrection, you'll see at the bottom it says, in the Senate, March 31st, 1864. All right? So, you could do the knowledge. If you really wanted to know if everything is accurate that's being read, you could verify with your 5 senses as well.
It's long.
All right, let's continue.
Mr. Harlan's reply to the position of Mr. Salisbury that slavery is right, is a divine institution, etc., was very able and interesting. He piled authority after authority, English as well as American, to show that there is no support of slavery, and especially of the title to services of the adult offspring of a slave.
So let's stop right there, because this is real deep right here. That the whole portion that we're about to go into. So we're going to take our time. We're not going to rush through this. I want to make sure everybody with me. So welcome, Lois.
It's long.
So he's countering the argument now, and he's utilizing English as well as American sources. Now, when you study the Founding Fathers, they were very much studying the philosophers and the educated scholars in Europe. Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, etc. Very influential people who contributed to the philosophy and thought of the colonists. They got some of their influence in terms of their concept of drafting the Constitution from indigenous members of the Moorish, empire, located locally on the eastern seaboard that they came in contact with, as well as previous civilizations, not just from their contemporaries in England and France, etc. They were also studying ancient Greece, Rome, etc. So he's saying, compiling authority after authority, showing that there is no support for slavery, and especially, this is very key right here, he's saying, especially of the title to services of the adult offspring of a slave. Now, what is the difference between what they call Arab slavery, which is the Islamic slave trade, and the transatlantic slave trade, the European slave trade? Do you know what is one of the biggest differences?
Children are slaves too, on and on and on.
Islam, the boy hit it right on the head. He hit the nail right on the head. The European slavery was perpetual. You give a birth to a child, that child, when it reaches the age of maturity, is a slave for the rest of his life. In Islam, that did not exist. So, for example, if a slave, or you had a child with your concubine, whatever, once that child reaches the age of maturity, that child is free. You see? So that's why conflicts took place, and they would always enslave their enemies. You know, I won't say always, never speak absent, not always. But often they would enslave their enemies because with the European, they could just continue breeding to make more slaves. But when you know, in terms of Islamic slavery, they had to acquire new slaves. They couldn't breed to create new slaves. That was against the laws of the Most High, which we're gonna get into. So that was one of the authorities that he's gonna go into, whatever. But let's continue.
At common law, and after also proven by the mouth of a favorite son of Virginia, that it has no legal existence by virtue of any municipal or statutory law. He declared that the only remaining law that could be cited for its support is the Levitical Code.
Stop right there, Miles. Do you know how powerful information that we're reading right now? This is a debate that took place in the Senate between two vying views. One trying to keep the institution of slavery, even, mind you, they're at war right now.
Wow.
They're at war. Tens of thousands of people are dying on American soil, not from foreign soldiers, but from their own brothers and sisters. Not their sisters, but their own brothers. It was brother against brother during the Civil War.
That's right.
So, at this time, that they're having this discussion, this is how the nation is going to move forward. And as stated, there is no legal existence by virtue of any municipal or statutory law, meaning no laws of government. He declared that the only remaining laws, so you can't even look at laws of government, not even in ancient past, there's no laws we can say, you know, in ancient Rome, according to this particular law, or in Greece, or in Britain, or in France, or in Belgium, or there was no law that they could point to. And they said the only remaining law that can be cited for its support is the Levitical Code. Is the Levitical Code. What is the Levitical Code?
25:10.
Well, that's part of the Levitical Code. The actual Levitical Code itself is the laws handed down to Moses.
Islam.
The Mosaic Law. The Torah. All right, Slomo. So he's reading excerpts from the Levitical law pertaining to this particular. And real quick, the reason why this is important is because where do you think the laws of America come from?
Go ahead.
Thou shalt not kill. Murder in the first degree, murder in the second degree, manslaughter, vehicular homicide, murder in the second degree. I mean, not murder in the second degree. Thou shalt not steal, right?
Grand larceny.
Grand larceny, petty theft, strong arm robbery, adultery. Now, when you go into a court dealing with adultery, and you were court as the adulterer, say the woman was the adulterer, right? And a divorce happens, and the man can provide evidence that his wife committed adultery on him. Does she get half? In many jurisdictions, she's going to get way less, if anything, granted anything at all, because it could be a breach, it could be considered a breach of contract, but that's based off the Levitical law. So this law governed the planet in ancient times, and it governs the planet right now. And during this time period, it was governing the planet. I know. So it's very important that you understand the significance of this law is something that moves the world in terms of how we're governed.
Islam.
Islam also. You know what? We're going to stop there. We're going to stop there because we're going to go through that speech. We're going to go through the rest of this debate in the following weeks. What you have to understand is that this information right here, it's a buildup. There's a crescendo. There's a point. There's a climax to this. But I need y'all Moors to walk with us because this is the keys that the Prophet Noble Ali left here for us. These are key components for us understanding. You know, you're tired of being abused. You're tired of being molested by the European. You got bills to pay. You got kids. You know what I'm saying? We understand that. We standing here with the same issues. You know, we work 9 to 5s or, 11s to 7s or whatever, you know what I mean? We do all that too. We raise our children, you know what I'm saying? We pay our bills, et cetera, but there's a deeper gnosis. There's a cure to our ills. But that cure cannot be, it's like, you have to undergo treatment. It's not like you just pop a pill one time and you cure it. Sometimes it's a treatment that you have to undergo.
That's right.
You understand? You have to continuously apply medication. What happens if you don't take an antibiotic all the way? You take it once or twice, but you don't fulfill the entire antibiotic. You know what happens?
That disease come back.
Not only does it come back, it's what's called a super infection. The disease now becomes resistant to the antibiotic. That's why the doctor always tells you to continue your treatment all the way until you completed your treatment, because the disease becomes worse. What I'm trying to stress is that even with this piece of information, you're not going to be free that simple. Like you have to really, really comprehend what the Prophet brought us. We go into demonstrations on how the Moorish Science of America is a government. We go into demonstrations on how some laws we're not bound by because they're unconstitutional. We go into deep, deep science. But if you come here and you just sit here for 3 hours and you don't show up again, then you got to drop in the bucket. You got a coin out of a boundless treasure.
That's right.
Islam.
Islam.
You get a gold coin out of a boundless treasure. So Moors, unfortunately, we've reached that time. That's why I don't want to go into too much deeper material because, again, it's 2:43. I usually end around 2:45, give Moors an opportunity to ask questions, and then we got to close out with a prayer, and got to be out of here in 15. You know what I mean? So I don't want to. And again, my demonstration goes into it goes deeper in. Like I like this point, this ending point right here, because now we can dive in head first next week. Like we can just get right to the nitty gritty and really go through this. But so this is a primary source right here. I would definitely encourage you to do more research on this. Look up what the 13th Amendment with 20 sections is. Come back with questions, because this is how you can get understanding and clarity. Y'all Moors might not have, actually, y'all Moors definitely wasn't here. Was it about 2 weeks ago? I did a demonstration on a court case. We were standing on these very laws that we're teaching right now. We have a court case where Moore got a case dismissed where he was supposed to get football numbers. It wasn't no secure party creditor. It wasn't no straw man this. None of that language is in the document. It's only the authority of the Prophet Noble Ali, the 13th Amendment with 20 sections, and explaining how the 14th and 15th Amendment are not applicable. The very same thing we're reading in the Prophet's literature. We stand on those precepts in order for us to navigate. So it's a whole lot. We're dealing with child support. We done seen all these types of issues. You know what I'm saying? Your taxes and all of that. There are remedies that the Prophet provided us, but we have to walk that path, boys.
Together.
Benefit from that.
Together.
So with that, boys, I'm gonna close out. Say Islam in peace. Open up the floor. Any questions, comments, concerns?